Okay, well, let's get this show on the road. Thank you all very much for joining us for the second of our webinars with SERVSIG 2020, and I'm very pleased that we're going to be following our theme that we started in the previous seminar, and that was how can we innovate by keeping humanity at the centre of service. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. If you can just keep your microphones muted, please pop questions for the panel in the chat. If you can't hear us, just do let us know through that chat. So I'm now going to hand over to Cara Walsh, who will be our facilitator. Cara is one of our key members on our strategic advisory board at QUT for the School of Advertising, Marketing and Public Relations. She's an amazing woman, has done all sorts of really interesting stuff in the marketing field, in industry and practice in Brisbane. And so I'm very appreciative of having Cara with us today to moderate this panel. So over to you, Cara.
Thanks, Rebecca. So welcome to everyone who is here. Of course, we would have preferred to host everyone here in sunny Queensland. We would have put on quite a show for you, but we appreciate everybody setting their alarm clocks or staying up late to keep the SERVSIG conference going and do it virtually. Today's panel is how we can innovate with keeping humanity at the center of service. And we have an exceptional panel for you guys from the US and from here in Brisbane and Queensland. We're going to be bringing you 3 different diverse perspectives across the topic. So first we have Professor Ray Fisk, who's going to chat to us about human experience in service marketing. Then we will have Professor Jonathan Roberts talk to us about the role of robots in enabling humans to innovate. And lastly, we will have Julie Salisbury give us a practical real-life example of the transformational journey that she's taken her customer experience team through at the Department of Transport and Main Roads here in Queensland. As Rebecca mentioned, I'm Cara Walsh. I live in sunny Brisbane, but have arrived here via Brooklyn, hence the New York accent. I am involved with QUT in a number of different ways, and I work predominantly around helping people put customers at the heart of their digital products and innovative programs. So prior to relocating to Australia, I spent some time and did a stint in Silicon Valley during the dot-com boom and the subsequent bust. And one of the books that the CEO at the startup I was working for gave every employee was called The Inmates Are Running the Asylum. And the premise of the book was that just because you can do something with technology doesn't mean you should. And as everyone knows what happened in the dot-com boom, technology companies let the programmers and the CIOs develop the product roadmaps without having conversations with customers or centering the experience around the actual humans. As an industry, I don't think we've come exceptionally far from that conversation back in 1999. So the premise of the book is, imagine at a terrifyingly aggressive rate, everything you regularly use is being equipped with technology. Think about your phone, cameras, cars, everything being automated and programmed by people who, in their rush to accept the many benefits of the silicon chip, which in this case you could replace with robot, AI, machine learning, have abdicated their responsibility to make these products easy to use. So today, as we're progressing further and further into the 5th industrial revolution, it's a really important time to kind of stop and look at how customer experience and human experience is evolving, and especially when it comes to innovation, what are we doing as governments, as academics, as commercial entities developing products? What are we doing to enable innovation and make truly spectacular services that are at the center of humanity? I will let Ray start the conversation. So Professor Ray Fisk is joining us this morning at 6 a.m. from Texas. Ray has a Bachelor of Science and an MBA and Ph.D. from Arizona State University. He's a professor of marketing at Texas State University. He has published in the Journal of Marketing, the Journal of Retailing, the Journal of the Academy of Marketing Science, the Journal of Service Research, European Journal of Marketing, Journal of Service Management, Journal of Services Marketing, among many others. He has published 6 books, including Serving Customers, Global Services Marketing Perspectives, and Services Marketing and Interactive Approach in its 4th edition. He is past president of the American Marketing Association's Academic Council, founder of the AMA Services Marketing Special Interest Group, SERVSIG, and American Marketing Association made him the inaugural recipient of the SIG Leadership Award in 2016. Just this past April, Ray presented his TEDx talk on how serving each other can save humanity. I will send the link in the comments for those of you who want to bookmark it. It's an exceptional talk. It's 12 minutes. I highly recommend it. And before I kick it over to Ray, be sure to send questions in the comment section. I'll be gathering the questions throughout all the talks. And at the end of the 3 presentations, we will have an open Q&A and a chance for you to have your questions answered by the 3 presenters. So with that, I will kick it over to Ray to talk about elevating the human experience.
Thank you, Kara. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Excellent. As Kara mentioned, my talk is about elevating the human experience, and it does relate to the TEDx talk that she mentioned. It's a little different, but it's on the same wavelength, let's just say that. So here are the 3 topics I'm going to get to if my cursor will cooperate. Interesting, all of a sudden I don't have cursors. Okay. There we go, finally. My 3 topics are the challenge of elevating the human experience, transformative service research, and how SERVCollab can help. I should emphasize that this is partially based on a paper that's forthcoming in the Journal of Service Management that I wrote with the SERVCollab Advisory Board. It covers everything, so the talk today is partially based on it. Once again, my cursor is out. There we go. So basically, I think the easiest and most direct starting point for this talk is that our species is lost at present. And I think we're lost in profound ways. So how did we get here? We know where we are physically. We know we're in the Milky Way galaxy. We know we're the 3rd planet from Earth. We know all of that, but we don't know how to find our way to live happily and sustainably on planet Earth. We're really lost on that. And that really is a serious problem for us, to be that lost. Being lost is dangerous, especially because this is a pandemic that we're experiencing. And we don't know how to provide for the 7 billion people on Earth right now. And in fact, nearly half of them don't even have the proper sanitation to wash their hands in a crisis. We also don't know how to prevent the environmental destruction of Earth. Both of those are very serious problems. So how can we transform service research to help work on those problems? Here are 3 things I think we should do. I think we should expand from customer satisfaction to human well-being. Yes. Escape the preposition to and embrace the preposition with. Now, basically, prepositions describe interactions. And in business, we talk a lot about B2C, B2B, and A to A. In our marketing literature and our service literature, but the to is the problem because it's something done to someone else. I really think we should be looking at HWH, or human with human. The with allows us to talk about working with people. And third, to shift from microeconomics to macro health, from organizations to society. Those three transformations, I think, can transform service research. Well, let me come back and emphasize the middle of what I just showed you. Of the three things I just showed you, I think the middle is actually the most important. Prepositions are typically in the middle, like B2C, B2B. The middle actually matters. And in fact, my first one was about customers. My third point was about organizations. It's what's happening between customers and organizations. That's the middle. That's the interactions. Basically, service occurs in interactions. Interactions are the essence of what humans need to survive on planet Earth. So I'm going to give you in this slide an overview of what I'm calling human experience and social roles. And I've grouped private experiences and public experiences on the left side of the screen, and inside private experiences, I've got family roles and friends roles. This is the friends and family we often talk about in terms of private experiences. And then there are experiences. These are customer roles, employee roles. We talk a lot about that in business literature, that we talk about customer experience and employee experiences studied in management. Those are mostly monetary interactions, as we all know, but the private are mostly non-monetary, which is what I have in the center of my screen here. All of these are part of human experience. Human experience aspects like the planet, which is really the link to my next slide. Here's another way of looking at interactions. This is the key model from Kate Raworth's book, 2018 book, Doughnut Economics. I recommend it to you highly. In her book, she has this model of the safe and just space for humanity, in which she argues that there's a social foundation that our species need. And in her model there, you can see there's a shortfall of public health aspects. Health itself, education is a public health issue. And she goes on in that book to discuss all things as shortfalls. Then on the outer edge, the healing edge, she argues that there are many things that we are doing that are overshooting our planet's ability to be healthy. So I think that makes great sense, and it's really a look at interaction. So if we can reduce all the destructive interactions amongst us and also reduce the destructive interactions with our planet, that can get us a long way. We need a new service logic to get there. Service dominant logic can only explain mutually beneficial exchange. And this is in page 117 of their book, Service Dominant Logic, that Vargo and Lush wrote. Actually, Lush and Vargo in that particular book, they note that they're focusing on mutually beneficial, but human exchanges are often involuntary. I recently spent 2 hours on the phone with my internet company. It's a monopoly. The monopoly company refused to do what they had promised me and refund the money they had overcharged me. 2 hours later, they said, well, maybe we'll give you $20 for your time. That's involuntary. And it's a role of dominance and submission. They were dominant over me, and all I could do was give up. 2 hours later, I gave up. Dominance and submission are the essential context of involuntary exchanges, and those are much of human history. We need to repair many human service interactions and do things differently. All of this leads to the larger point about inequality in service systems. Inequality is not a flaw in our human nature. There are many people that think it is. There are many people that think the poor will always be with us. But I don't think that's true at all. I think inequality is a flaw in the design of service systems. And inequality has a long history in service systems. The systems of emperors, enslavement, aristocracies, feudalism, and colonialism were all designed for inequality. And they work extremely well at preserving inequality. We need to design for fairness instead. And that gets me to a very important idea in terms of grouping human interactions into two groups. I'm grouping on the left side of the screen what I'm calling versus interactions, and on the right side of the screen what I'm calling with interactions. So versus interactions include competitive interactions and conflictual interactions like war. These are all situations where there are winners and losers. I'm calling these the disservice zone. And on the with interactions side, these are collaboration and cooperation. These are mutually beneficial. I'm calling those the service zone. What we need to do if we're going to improve service systems and design for fairness is to reduce the versus interactions, control them, regulate them, and prevent them from damaging each other, and then increase the with interactions of collaboration and cooperation so that we are helping each other. Those changes would profoundly influence our species. What we're seeing during the COVID crisis right now is that, in fact, we're going the opposite direction. Around the world, there's more arguing, more competition than ever because COVID has divided instead of uniting our species. That's not going to help us. And that gets me to a quote that I really like from the great Bob Marley from Jamaica. Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. I think we need to emancipate ourselves from the logic of arguing with each other in versus logics, of competing with each other when we shouldn't necessarily be competing, and worse, getting into wars and other conflicts. All of that undermines human progress. It's our own fault. It's mental slavery is my point. Bob Marley had us it right. So let me then elaborate on collaboration, since collaboration is the essence of SERVCollab. Collaboration occurs when people eagerly engage in working with each other. And collaboration is based on shared trust. These are two quotes from an article I did with several co-authors in 2019 titled Systemic Social Innovation, Co-Creating a Future Where Humans and All Life Thrive. In that article, we argued that without collaboration, we can't get there. I'm making that same argument today. To do it right, we have to learn to serve each other. And we're capable of that. We are very capable of it. In much of our human private interactions, we do a much better job than we do in our monetary interactions. If we do it right, they're human with human interactions. And that gets me to a key point about the service research field. Kara mentioned that I've been involved in the service research field for a long time. I'm in my 40th year. 1966, at the bottom of my slide here, was before the service research field really took off. It was an early article on services. The title was What is Meant by Services. It was 3 pages. Not much was known back in 1966. But by the 1980s, the service research field took off. And in our last 10 years, we have made very significant progress in doing what I'm calling climbing the ladder of service complexity. 3 things that I think are key parts of that. Service design has allowed us to not only study problems, but design solutions. Service ecosystems has helped us think bigger about the service environments we're studying. And transformative service research has given us a more clear sense of purpose. And with that, let me show you more about transformative service research. TSR is a call for service research that advocates for the personal and collective well-being of consumers, citizens, and the entire global ecosystem. TSR focuses research on reducing human suffering and improving human well-being. SERVCollab is based on transformative service research. So now let me tell you what is SERVCollab. SERVCollab is a contraction of serving humanity through collaboration, and SERVCollab is a service research collaborative for diagnosing and treating humanity's service system problems. SERVCollab seeks to elevate the service research community to collaborating on big and deep science solutions to profound human service system problems. SERVCollab will collaborate, of course, with the existing service research ecosystem to build a global service research network, which is robust enough to work on big and deep service science problems. We need a lot of us to make that happen. And to build research capacity by recruiting, training, and collaborating with scholars from other disciplines. We need to reach further beyond our own group and expand. To seek funding for these major service science projects, because without funding, we can only do small projects. We need funding to do big projects. To create new service research tools and new measurement systems for these large scale problems. We don't have the right tools yet. We don't have the measurement systems yet, but we can create those. And to collaboratively design or redesign solutions to these problems. SERVCollab's mission then is to serve humanity through service research collaborations that catalyze reducing human suffering and improving human well-being. We have 3 human rights goals: to serve all humans with research that respects their dignity and supports their rights, to enable collaboration among researchers and organizations that span disciplinary and national boundaries in pursuit of diagnosing and treating humanity's many service system problems, and to seek transformative reductions in human suffering and measurable improvements in human well-being. So serve, enable, transform. And we have 3 project themes that we are currently working on. We might have more later, but these are 3 very big ones, so it's more than enough for now. The first is inclusion. Now, lack of inclusion is at the root and core of unjust human service systems. I don't have time to tell you about an article I did with several co-authors on inclusion, but I will tell you about a first project on inclusion that is directly tied to this in the next slides here. But the next item we have in addition to inclusion is service language. Language enables human interactions. SERVCollab encourages projects that seek to create service language that researchers and human populations can use to understand and improve human well-being for all. By arguing for the preposition with instead of to, that's a minor change in the language we might use about humans, but it's important if we say with. It changes the context of the interactions. And third, climate change. The service research field needs projects that balance serving human needs now with serving the needs for future generations by protecting the fragile service ecosystem of planet Earth. And I'll show you just a little bit about that idea too. The first SERVCollab project is titled Rethinking Service Systems and Public Policy, a Transformative Refugee Service Experience Framework. It's led by my colleague Silke Bonique, Sertan Kabadaya, and myself. We started this project at the May 2019 Transformative Consumer Research Conference, and we have had a team of 13 service scholars at that conference from 7 different countries. 8 of those members are actually migrants. By that I mean that they are working in a different country than where they started in life. And that article is forthcoming in the Journal of Public Policy and Marketing. It will be out, we think, in early 2021. It was a very exciting project to work on. And I'm going to share with you our key figure from that article, which is what we call the Transformative Refugee Service Experience Framework. There's 2 parts to it. The top part is the experience part, the second part, the refugee service journey. So let me start with the top part. The top part is looking at refugee service experiences and the characteristics of refugee service systems. On the left side, you can see that a hostile refugee service system might cause refugee suffering. And we have many of those around the world because there are so many refugees on planet Earth today. But there are other parts of the world where there are hospitable refugee service systems, and they are encouraging and enabling well-being amongst those refugees. So we've got basically some extremes from hostile to hospitable and extremes from suffering to well-being. The refugee service journey we looked at in terms of the entry stage of becoming a refugee, the transition stage from making that change in status and finding a new place to stay and live. And the exit stage is really where you finally become more acculturated and assimilated in the new location. And then we looked at 3 levels, the micro, the meso, and the macro level of the refugee service systems. Inside this bottom part of this framework, in other words, there are 9 different points where the refugee service experience could be studied. We didn't propose a measurement system for those refugee service experiences. We're hoping that someone soon or multiple researchers might tackle some of those projects. With this framework, refugee problems around the world could be studied. And now my last key idea is the tripartite model for service sustainability. It's adapted from a project that Kunio Shirahara and I did back in 2014. We argued that we aren't thinking broadly enough about services. We've talked a lot in our service research about the human side of service, the human to human that I'm showing, or human with human that I'm showing in my diagram. But there's an ecosystem services literature, I'll get it right, ecosystem services literature. And they look at how humans and all life are dependent upon the services from ecosystems. So we argue that we should be looking at this as a triangle, a tripartite model, that we're dependent upon nature and we should respect that and we should quit exploiting nature. So it's human with human and human with nature. And finally then, here's how to get involved with SERVCollab. Here's how to join by coming to our website, servcollab.org, and how to communicate with us. We have a Facebook group. We have a Twitter account at SERVCollab, and we're also a group on LinkedIn. And you can certainly email me directly at rayfisk@servcollab.org. And with that, I'll stop.
That was excellent. That was a wealth of information in a compact 19 minutes. So thank you for that, Ray. I will share the link for the SERVCollab is in the chat for anybody who wants to go check that out. Please remember to send through your questions so that we can be sure to grill Ray at the end of the session. Thanks for that. Next up, we are going to have Professor Jonathan Roberts. So Jonathan is over here in Australia. We're moving from the US back over to Australia. He is the professor of robotics for Queensland University of Technology. His main research interests are in the area of field robotics, design robotics, and medical robotics. Jonathan was co-inventor of the UAV Challenge, an international flying robot competition. Before joining QUT, Jonathan was the research director of CSIRO's Autonomous Systems Laboratory, where he developed projects in the area of museum robotics and telepresence. Jonathan is a past president of the Australian Robotics and Automation Association. He currently serves as a senior editor of the IEEE Journal of Robotics and Automation Letters, and an associate editor of the Journal of Field Robotics. Today, Jonathan will be talking to us about the role of robotics in freeing up humanity to focus on innovation. So with that, I will hand over to Jonathan, who I think is presenting with the background of your robotics lab. Is that correct?
That's right. I decided it was too dark and gloomy to be there in person because it's dark here. But yes, that's right. Thank you, Cara. So yes, my name is Jonathan Roberts. You'll see this picture of our lab or our shed, or actually we call it the Learning Factory. And we have a new center called the ARM Hub, the Advanced Robotics for Manufacturing Hub. And I'm just going to quickly describe that before I go into my main part of my talk. This only started in March this year, right at the time we were all told to go home. So it wasn't the best timing to start something, but anyway. Now I've got the same issue as Ray. Here we go. There's my cursor. Okay, so we're actually we've set up this this collaboration hub. So we've formed a not-for-profit company. So even though I work for the university, Queensland University of Technology, I spend my time in this not-for-profit company. The university sort of gives my time to this company. And we work with some other research institutes from Australia and around the world. We work with the government, and we work with a company called UAP, which I'll describe a little bit in a moment, which was kind of the inspiration for much of our work. I'm not going to read through all of this, but basically we're sort of set up effectively to get robotics adopted by companies in the broad sense of manufacturing. We're being generous in what we describe as manufacturing. So, you know, it covers a lot of things really. But our mission is to help companies that need to use robots to actually get them embedded into their businesses, and we're measured on our success by their success. So that's what our KPIs are. We're not there to make money. We're actually not there to publish papers or write books or do anything like that. Of course, we will do because we're university researchers as well, but we're actually measured by the government to make sure these companies start adopting robotics to improve their businesses. And you might be amazed to increase their staff numbers. right? So most people think about robots and not having as many people and maybe reducing jobs, but it's quite the opposite is what we're seeing and what we're being tasked to do. You know, how can we grow businesses by, and that is in people as well, by helping them adopt robots. So our model is we have a lot of experts back at the university who we go back to and pull into projects. When companies come to us, we go and visit companies, show them what's possible, try and explain to them that their staff are actually the key to solving most of their problems, which I'll talk about in a little while. And our experts within the university are from all sorts of backgrounds. So I myself am an engineer. So I'm an aerospace engineer by trade who then got into driverless cars, then into all this other robotic stuff. But many of these people you see on this slide, for example, aren't engineers. Jared in the middle top there is a human interaction designer, human-machine interaction designer. Glenda's an architect. Muge on the right there is an interior architect. We have people from all different backgrounds that we're working with to actually help get robotics adopted. We've only been going since March, but we've already got a healthy ecosystem of companies, big corporates, the smaller companies, research institutions and government. One peculiarity of Queensland in particular, where Brisbane is located, is that 97% of our companies are small to medium enterprises, and something like, I think it's 95% of businesses have got 5 employees or less. So that has been one of the things that's been identified as holding back the adoption of robotics, particularly in this region, is that very small companies have found it challenging to kind of to adopt this equipment, which may be more expensive, maybe a bit of a gamble. They just tend not to do that because it's seen as too high risk. Of course, we know that it's actually high risk also not to adopt technology, but anyway, we're trying to help them get over that problem. We're also working with, and in fact this morning I came from the city of Townsville, which is a 1.5 hours flight from here north. We have these regional hubs which the Queensland government has set up in the last few years, which will try and help steer our work into the regional towns around Queensland, which tend to have a manufacturing base as well. So we're not forgetting regional hubs. And then we have other partners in other cities around Australia. What I want to do though now is really talk about a project we started 3.5 years ago called Design Robotics. So this is where we've got a lot of design people together, who I mentioned earlier, with roboticists working with this company called UAP. So you probably haven't heard of UAP, but you will all know what UAP make when I explain in a minute. So UAP is a Brisbane-based company that fabricates artwork. Now, the nature of fabricating artwork is that it's often one-offs or low production runs. It's not mass-produced. So we're calling it mass customization. So it's not like a traditional, say, car manufacturing. So UAP have a factory in Brisbane, adjacent actually to our shed I showed you earlier. They have a factory in China and one in New York, in upstate New York. The thing that you all know that they make is they make the Oscars. So those gold-looking statues that you see on Oscar night, they're made by UAP. And of course, they make all sorts of other things, right? So a very sort of significant company in the art world. What you may not realize when you go to art galleries or see large sculptures or large pieces of art is chances are the artist whose name is on that piece of art didn't make that piece of art. Most people don't realize this. You know, the artist is the creative that comes up usually with the concept and the idea, and but they don't necessarily make it. And this is why companies like UAP actually come in and they actually make the artwork. So here's an example. So this is a staircase by Gary Partners at a university in Sydney, UTS, University of Technology Sydney. This was constructed in 2014 for a new building. This is a very interesting staircase, very hard to make. It's kind of, yeah, it's like this crumpled paper bag effect, but it's made of a shiny reflective metal. Gives all sorts of interesting patterns as you walk up the stairs. The interesting thing about this particular staircase is it's so complicated that it was, of course, could only really be designed with a computer. So computer-aided design, which people will have heard of, that's how this was constructed, in a computer and tested out to see how it would look, how it would fit in the building. The problem then comes in how you manufacture such a thing. So it's the latest and greatest design technology, but actually this staircase was then made by hand. So what my friends at UAP say is that it was designed by the most modern systems you could get, but it was manufactured with a 4,000-year-old metal beating technique with very expert people, of course, to actually manufacture these panels.
爸爸刚才把我的衣服穿反了。
Somebody needs to go on mute. Okay, I think that's good. Okay. Here you can see the staircase as it's being put together at UTS. So you can see all the welds there. That they'll all be ground off and everything will be polished up. Okay, so yeah, so CAD design, very old-fashioned way of making things with experts. This is another piece of artwork that's actually outside one of the art galleries here in Brisbane. This is a famous piece of artwork in that this is a cast fishing net. So a sort of a fishing net was placed in a mold. There was a sand mold was made of that cast. I think this is bronze. The point of this showing you this picture is that when this comes out of the mold, it took a couple of thousands of hours of experts with tiny little things called Dremels. These, you can think of them as a drill that has to tidy up this metal, because when this metal comes out, it's all pretty rough and it needs to be finished. And that was, I believe, 2,000 hours of people, with these little machines working on this. So incredibly labor intensive and incredibly unpleasant job as well. Not something that many people want to do. You can see there's a couple of artworks here in this lobby. On the right-hand side, you can see a panel. This is an artwork by an artist called Lindy Lee. These metal panels here, of course, they start their life as a flat piece of metal. They have to be finished in a certain way, which I'll show you in a second. And then the pattern and holes are cut in to Lindy Lee's specification. And then there's a decorative elements here you can see in a lobby of a commercial building. Those are those panels over there. So what I really want to talk to you about then is the humans at the center of using robots. So we've been working with for a number of years with this company UAP, and I'm going to tell you a little story. So a couple of Christmases ago, this gentleman here, Matteo, who's an expert finisher, actually grew up and learned his trade in Italy. He now works here in Brisbane, but one of his jobs is to linish metal. So linishing just stands for linear finishing, and you can see him standing there at a panel. He's got that tool on the right-hand side, which is just you can see that sandpaper drum. He has to move up and down. Now, to do this Lindy Lee project I showed you in the previous slide, they had to do, I think it was 8 panels. And Matteo came to us and said each panel would take him 24 hours on the tools. So that's 24 hours of him holding that tool to actually linish each of these panels. And he really didn't want to do that, right? As you can imagine, it's backbreaking work. He estimated he could maybe do it for a couple of hours a day at the most before, he'd get a sore back. It's just too difficult. So if you start to work out how long that would take him, and it's a very unpleasant job, it's a difficult thing. So he said, could we develop a robot system with him to do this task for him or with him? And that's the crucial thing here. It was with him. So we put him together with one of our mechatronics engineers, Amelia Liu, and the two of them built this system. And that's the important thing here, is they actually did this together. So what the concept was, of course, is Matteo would then have, instead of his hand tool, he would have a robot tool. So he would still be there, but he would be using the robot to do this job. So the two of them worked together for 3 days, right? So this entire project was only 3 days long. They designed the whole system. They took an off-the-shelf robot. We can see that arm there. They designed the frames. Matteo is also good with welding, so he welded everything up. Amelia programmed everything, showed Matteo how to program things. They worked out the process together. This was one of these examples where you need the expert in doing the task you're trying to partially automate for them. They have to be part of the design team. And anyway, the two of them after 3 days actually solved the problem. And I'll show you a video now. There's no sound in this video, so I can describe a few things as I talk. So, so remember I said it would take him 24 hours to do this job. They got the job down to 8 hours. So that's a third of the time. But significantly, in that 8 hours, Matteo wasn't on the tools. He was changing sandpaper. So for 6 of those 8 hours, he was changing sandpaper. He was spraying lubricant. He was having a cup of tea. He was learning how to program the robot. He was, doing other things. He then had to spend about 2 hours fixing stuff up that the robot didn't do properly. You can see at the bottom of that video areas, for example, where the robot has missed. So he would fix that up. But the point is here, they cut the job time by a third. He no longer had a lot of backbreaking work. He upskilled. He is now one of the people at UAP that programs robots on a daily basis. That he still does finishing, but he also does robot programming. He has kind of a nicer job now. And it was a very good story. Of course, that was very simple. So that robot is what we call an open loop robot, in the fact that the robot, you just program it to do the thing and it just gets on with it. There's no feedback. This is another example, another project we're working on at the moment by an artist called Emily Floyd. This is actually outside QUT. If you were here at the conference, we could take you down and show you this if you were here in person. Unfortunately, you're not. But you can see these are about a human size. So if I stood next to it, I'd be about the same height as this robot. What we're doing is finishing the feet, which you can see are a complicated 3D shape. These elements are designed in a computer, like that staircase we showed you earlier. Another robot is then actually used to cut out a mold, a sand mold. So this robot's got a bit on the end and it actually cuts some sand. That's then molten aluminium, in this case, is poured in, and out pops a bird foot. We then have to scan in the bird foot. So you can see here there's a robot and it's got a special camera on, and it has to actually measure the 3D geometry. The interesting thing about when you do cast objects is they shrink. So even though we have a beautiful computer model that the first robot used to cut the mold, when you actually pull the metal object out, it's shrunk because as it solidifies, it shrinks a bit. So you don't actually know precisely the geometry of what the robot's got to work on. So here you can see a scanning system doing that. We then, with all these views, we can build up a nice 3D model of the bird foot, and then we have now a perfect set of geometry for the bird foot, which we can then feed into a system. You can see Barish here, who's one of our PhD students, is developing a system that will then actually automatically finish this bird foot. Again, having the person that would normally do it would have input in here and would sort of stand back and, I guess, monitor the machine, change sandpaper, things like that. So again, just to remove the sort of the back-breaking work. Now, back to the beginning. So I talked about metal bashing, and this idea that this is a 4,000-year-old technique. It's a lot of work. It's very difficult. There are not many people that can actually do this, and we're looking at other ways to do this. So we've been working with our colleagues at RMIT University in Melbourne. we've been together developing a system of a thing called incremental sheet forming, where a robot actually bashes the metal, but instead of hammering the metal, it pushes on the metal and drags around a very small sphere on the end of a little post, and it stretches the metal. So this is exactly the same as panel beating. When you're beating a metal panel, you're actually stretching the metal, and this robot will do the same. This is one we did a few weeks ago. We call it the Caterpillar. And here is a time lapse of this. So this is an aluminium sheet at the beginning of this session, and by the end of the session, about half an hour later, it's actually made, I'll play that again for you, it's very fast. It's actually made these indentations. So what we're trying to do here is take the skill of the expert panel beater. We'll be scaling this up in much larger robots and working with steel in the next few months. And we're getting their input onto how to translate their skill into a robot system. Not to replace them completely, but so that they are operating a machine. So we replace their hammer, which is their current tool, and we give them a full robot system as their tool. We still fully expect that in many of these art pieces, they will still be going back to the hammer to do portions of their work, but the idea is to get the bulk of the work done with the robot, and then they can do some finessing and sort of fine tuning with their hammer. Just anecdotally, UAP always report when they talk to people that every time they have bought a robot in their business, because they now have quite a few robots, they've employed 6 new staff. So because their business is growing, because of the robot and the capabilities that robots bring. So as I said right at the beginning, that's our aim here, is to increase employment by using robotics, because robots fundamentally are quite dumb. Many people have seen science fiction and thinks robots are these very smart things. They're not really. So in order to do these very complicated things, we still need people right at the center of the process, both to design them and to work with them as a tool. Okay, and I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Jonathan, I may just ask you one quick question that came through, is what's the difference between automation and robotics?
Oh, okay. So yeah, so robotics really normally has to have some moving element. So I showed you robot arms there. So, that's clearly a robot. Some people would say driverless cars, robotics, because the thing is moving around. But for example, a washing machine, you would say, is automation because it's not going anywhere or moving around. There is no actual proper definition between the two things, and many people argue for many hours about what the difference is. But loosely, if it's got arms and it moves around, then we call it robotics.
Excellent. Thanks for that. We are going to go to our final speaker before we hit the Q&A, which is Julie Salisbury. And I'm just, so Julie is here in Queensland with us as well. She is currently the General Manager of Customer Experience for Queensland's Department of Transport and Main Roads. She's accountable for embedding the customer at the heart of departmental policymaking and strategy deployment. Julie and her team work collaboratively with functions and delivery arms across the Department of Transport and Main Roads to ensure customer perspectives, motivations, and expectations are considered up front and used to guide the development of product and service delivery. National acknowledgement and recognition of the team's commitment and efforts include 2 Australian Business Awards and achieving finalist status in the Australian Service Excellence Awards 4 years in a row. Today, Julie will be talking to us about the transformational CX journey her department has taken to put the customer at the heart of their innovation. So for those of you overseas, the Department of Transport and Main Roads is an enormous entity here in Queensland that manages all of the public transportation, the roads, even gets into marine, and has, you know, millions of transactions with its customer base. So Julie is going to walk us through the transformation that her department's gone through over the last couple of years, putting the customer and humanity at the center. So take it away, Julie.
Thanks, Cara. Can I just check you can see my screen?
Yep,
Fantastic.
we can see your screen. Yep.
Thank you. Okay, thanks very much for the invitation to participate today. I'm just going to start out by showing you the 6 government objectives. So this is the Queensland government objectives. The one that my conversation today points to is be a responsive government. So essentially that's just about making transactions seamless and services easy to use. And as Cara mentioned, we do have quite the breadth of products and services in the department, upwards of 700 individual products and services. Rebecca, I might ask you to play the first video, please. This video will give you a bit of an idea of the breadth that I was just talking about, as well as some of the large numbers of transactions that we do across the state.
His vest from? Not yours, is it? Take it back.
Thanks, Rebecca. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of what we're up to here in Queensland and the lay of the land. I just want to now talk you through the program. So we had a customer experience transformation program, which was a program that ran for 4 years in total. Some of the items that we covered will come up on the screen soon. It'll move quite quickly like a flight path. But generally speaking, the innovative approach I want to talk to you about today in terms of the government context is 3 things around technology, capability uplift, and culture. And in relation to that, you know, we are a monopoly, we're a government organisation. One might ask, what's the burning platform? Why are you concentrating on this? We've got a very future-focused Director General, so that's a CEO in government terms. So our DG is very focused on customer centricity, and he's set quite the stretch goal of meeting customer requirements first time, every time. With all the disruptors that are around at the moment, ones we couldn't have possibly foreseen, that's certainly something that we're all working on together. So I'll just let this run and talk to you a little bit about some of the items here. So back in the early days, we built a customer experience lab. So that's an innovation lab brought thousands of customers into co-design a range of products and services. We look to baseline against the International Customer Service Standard. I'll talk more about that later. We use human-centered design methodology. We actually use the triple diamond, not the double diamond. We find that works better for us. We developed some customer segmentation and personas specific to departmental customers. We've got a really cool online customer panel, which is like having a group of customers right next door in a room where you can knock on the door and ask them a range of questions and get some really timely feedback. Okay, so this is again a bit more of the future. So if we think that the program finished in April 2019, this is post that. So I guess you have to make a decision as an organisation when you're done transforming. You can't keep doing that. You know, you need to decide about, okay, we've set the new norm, and now we need to learn and grow about that, or like regarding that, and customer expectations and requirements. So we are now a permanent branch within the department rather than a program, and we have been doing some awesome work around nudge and behavioural economics and pilots, which have been really interesting. Rebecca's team at QUT have been really helpful with that and really supporting us to understand that methodology and how it can apply, particularly in a post-recovery point of view from COVID as well. There's been some organic movement to active transport, for example. How can we maximise that to hopefully reduce congestion? This is some more bragging about our Australian Service Excellence Awards. We're pretty proud of those. In our Australian Business Awards, we're redefining our human-centered design maturity journey. We use the UK design ladder, which many of you would be familiar with as our maturity scale, and we're just in the middle of reviewing that as we are our customer value proposition, which I'll get to shortly. So these are our 4 objectives. There's a lot of words there, but basically what that means is that we need to focus on culture and our ability to celebrate and story tell and help our people do that for their people. So, you know, it's important from a communication and change point of view that people hear the messages from their direct manager wherever possible. Sometimes they don't have that comms ability in their toolkit yet, so we help them build it. So very much a train the trainer approach. We also want to grow as a centre of excellence for customer experience in government and continue to collaborate with academia and industry to really make sure we're always focused on best practice and where we can improve. And then the last one's really about customer advocacy and using a voice of the customer approach. So how are we going to do this? We've actually done 50 individual projects over the last 2 years. So these are individual customer research and insights projects. We use the customer value proposition that's on your screen to make sure that we are focusing on what customers value. So this was developed in 2014 through direct customer research. I've actually, working with Rebecca at the minute as well on refreshing the CVP to make sure that it is contemporary for 2020. Particularly in the last 6 or 8 months and the different things that have happened around the world and, you know, locally as well. So you can see there's 3 elements to that. When they all converge, that's where the magic happens. None of those things are difficult, so it's not rocket science. Sorry, I just got a reboot notice from my computer. Go away. So we've got respectful and responsive customer care. Timely and accurate information, again, very straightforward, nothing complex around that. And there's the affordability issue and efficiency, which is where customers see the safety element of the transport system, just so you're aware. That's why it's not out there separately. So we use the CVP to underpin all of our research projects. From a cultural point of view, we have the Ways We Work program. Again, human-centered design lens applied to this and co-design with customers and staff. Probably, I now think 8's too many. 5 or 6 probably feels like the right number, but nonetheless, over the last few years, we've run with these, and this is kind of like the crux of why we've been award-winning, is the way that we've developed these in consultation with people, as Ray was saying earlier, not developing something in a room and going, ta-da, isn't this wonderful? Actually making sure we're incorporating feedback throughout in the iteration process. I'm sure you've all got a customer charter. nothing new about that. What I do want to do in the next 12 months is work out how to measure that, so using SMART objectives and not doubling up on what we already measure. As a large department of over 8,000 people, we've got so much data. We already measure many, many things. So just connecting what we've already got as it, you know, from the waterfall approach of your customer charter, making sure that we're on point with that. Human Centred Design Ladder, I've already talked a little bit to this. We've got a number of different projects that fit across. Now that we are moved from a transformation phase to, you know, a business as usual on steroids phase, I guess, we really want to be focusing on things in steps 2 and 3. So the UX side of things in step 1, fixing forms, looking at Coro, all that sort of stuff, that's important, but that's not the value add that we've got. We kind of want to fix the policy in the first place to say, do we need a letter? What's the best approach to engage with customers on their terms? Customer research strategy. So I mentioned many, many projects. What we now are looking at is where are the gaps. So we had very excited projects teams coming to us going, we want to talk to customers, we want to understand their needs and what they value. So we need to now take a step back and go, okay, we've done the bottom up, which has been really helpful from a cultural perspective and getting buy-in. But now we need to take that focus from the top down about where are the gaps within our insights that we've got, and looking at things like mobility as a service, connected autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles. We've got the world's longest superhighway in one state, electric vehicle superhighway in one state, which you know, our engineering guys are all very proud of, as they should be. So there's things that are very future focused that we need to be in front of and making sure that we're not preparing something for customers that they're not ready for or maybe not understanding potentially. I'm thinking I might take you through to the transport talk. Sorry, beg my pardon. I think no, sorry about that. So I talked a little bit about nudge theory earlier. The project we ended up selecting, we had a couple of ideas. One was about how to discourage people who don't have a permit parking in disabled parking places to stop doing that. Another one was about fatalities and motorcyclists. They're increasing. How can we accept that people love the freedom of riding a motorcycle, but try and engage them in a conversation about the risk of doing that and that the numbers are indeed going up. And there was another one about not driving through flooded borders. But at the end of the day, we chose this 2-seat journey, which was about trying to get customers to move out of a private vehicle onto a bus potentially, or whether it was moving from a bus to a train, for example, if it got them to their destination quicker. Talk a little bit about our digital license project. So this project was originally called something snappy like modernisation of registration and licensing. But yeah, I can't remember, it was very long. And we actually managed to rename it the Customer Orientated Registration and Licensing Project. So it totally flipped an IT related project to a customer lens. So they're in a pilot phase around the app at the moment. Lots of co-design with customers. We got them in to draw some wireframes and some pictures about what they thought we could use a digital license app for, as well as what they thought it would look like in practice. Don't we love Miro these days? I don't miss hard copy post-it notes. I think it's pretty great that you can just export all that content then. So this is what our customers told us. They want to control what data they release. So what that relates to is they may want to prove their age, so adult proof of age, that they're over 18 for a certain service or entering a pub or what have you. Or they might want to share their address as well if they're trying to do a lease agreement. Privacy is a huge one, as is being accessible. So the pilot's still underway, as I mentioned, but great news I did hear yesterday, hot off the press, is that it looks like we've got 61 is our current result for NPS score with the app in the pilot. So we're pretty happy with that. Transport Talk. This is our online panel. Now I've only got a few minutes left, but we'll get Rebecca. Can you play video 2, please? This is the social media campaign, very short, for our Transport Talk membership.
Want to have your voice heard on how we could improve Queensland's transport system? On Transport Talk, our online customer research community, you can have your say and make an impact on a wide range of transport-related topics. However you travel, and wherever in Queensland you are, we want to hear from you. So join Transport Talk today and be a part of the conversation.
Thanks, Rebecca. Okay, so we now have over 4,400 customers on our online panel. We know a lot about them as part of their setting up their profile, their joining survey, if you like. We know about the frequency of travel and the mode that they use, public transport usage as well. If they own a boat, a car, a motorbike, for example, or a variation of all those things, we understand their socio-demographic profiles. So that's extremely helpful when you're trying to narrow down a sample for a particular study. A bit more information about our community, nice range of ages. Would be helpful to have more young men between 18 and 35 in remote Queensland. So we'll do some targeting membership drive for that. Fairly nice balance between gender, male and female. Great thing that I'm really proud of here is that we've got the ABS statistics for Queensland. We want our community to be representative of Queenslanders. So in our community so far, we've got 24% of customers have identified as having some form of disability, as well as 12% saying that they speak a language other than English at home. So that's important to make sure that we are talking to our diverse Queensland base. When asked why they joined Transport Talk, you can see that almost 65% joined to help improve transport infrastructure and to share their views and opinions. Very small percentage joined for the monetary benefits and prizes. The incentives, there are incentives, but they're very small. And it's a prize draw situation, so you don't get an incentive for each study that you participate in. This is a very quick, it's got no sound, so I'll play it from here. This is a very quick demo of what the platform itself looks like. It's actually run on Qualtrics, which is a pretty popular platform. So it's very user-friendly. My team tell me the programming is pretty straightforward as well. You can embed videos and then ask questions about understanding and awareness and education about it afterwards. You can also include brochures, and customers can select what they like or didn't like about the language or the pictures and then give you a bit of an idea about why. Different ranges of selection methods there, pretty straightforward. You can actually ask questions and then give customers the answers. So this is really helpful when we talk about road safety rules, you know, which motorist needs to give way in this situation, U-turn rules, that sort of stuff. Rebecca, I think I might be almost out of time.
Yep. Customer
Experience Lab, very quickly. This is our space I mentioned before that's in the middle of the city. That's an 8-metre immersion screen, which is really cool. We can build cardboard boxes and make a customer service centre here to scale, and then work out accessibility and inclusion parameters and make sure that we're meeting all those. International Customer Service Standard is essential so that you're not just measuring yourself, but you also have a third party provide a baseline on how you're tracking and know that you're moving in the right direction. This has got 27 elements over 4 categories, which is kind of like the balanced scorecard, which many of you would be familiar with. Highly recommend having some sort of metric outside your organisation to keep you honest. probably finish on this one. This is our customer experience hub, which is a self-service hub purpose-built for staff to go in and have a look about all the kit that we've got for customer experience across the department. There's a virtual reading room. All the research and insights are there in one place. There's templates and tools and a range of other links that staff really appreciate and have taken on board. So I might pass back to Cara.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Julie. We have had a couple of questions come through. So we have about 20 minutes. I may jump back just to Ray before he falls asleep. He hasn't had his morning coffee. We have a question that's come in thanking you for your wealth of information. Just in point of the project theme of service language in SERVCollab. This is a service researcher. He has an Arabic background, and the question is, how could we expand that wealthy field of service research with Arabic audiences and countries?
Thank you, Cara. Raheem, thanks for the question. And I have had my morning coffee. I'm already 3 cups full, so I'm doing fine. So I'm not from the Arab countries, of course, but there are many service scholars that are. Would be the first point I would make to you, Raheem. And SERVSIG that Cara mentioned, I found it is very eager in helping expand the service research community worldwide. So my hope would be that some of those people from Arabic speaking countries can help SERVSIG do that, and you could help us too, because the more researchers worldwide that are studying human needs in their area, the more progress we can make together on our planet, because we really need to include every populated part of the planet. If there are humans there, we need to find ways of helping. To me, I would add a few other things. There are specific issues of inclusion that I mentioned in my talk. I would encourage research on inclusion issues in Arabic countries. Now, I don't know the specifics, you would know them better than me, but inclusion issues that I've been looking at include issues of refugees, inclusion issues of women, inclusion issues of children. There are many others we could list. Exclusion as opposed to inclusion. Exclusion is too common in any country, in any part of the world. We need inclusive human societies. And language is part of that. So certainly the word with that I was mentioning, how could things be done with the people in the countries of the Arabic world as opposed to So much of the history of our species, something was being done to someone else, and the person who was the victim was not enjoying the experience. We need with, and if you do things with, you're less likely to have victims. And finally, on climate, no matter what, there's always local microclimate issues that could be addressed in any part of the world. In any city, there are microclimate issues of water, air, etc., that could be addressed. But I would certainly encourage you to find allies who are from Arabic-speaking countries who are already in the service research field, who could help you even more than I, because I can only switch to English, and I'm only doing American English as opposed to Aussie English or British English at that.
Oh, thanks for that, Ray. And at the risk of this potentially crashing the Zoom, anyone who wants to turn their camera on to, try to make this a bit more interactive is welcome to do that. I want to switch to Julie because Ray, you talked a lot about equity and inclusion. And then you were mentioning that there's really a need to look at kind of these broken systemic frameworks in service delivery. And Julie, you spoke a lot about how, you guys did a lot of cultural change, like I guess employee engagement, as well as shifting from a technology project to a customer focus. When you were doing that transformational shift, did you notice that there were any inequities in the systems that you previously had, or the ways you were doing service delivery previously? Did you have to build new, more equitable frameworks?
Thanks, Cara. There's a couple of things to that. We've done some research around equity in public transport specifically, so making sure we're talking with vulnerable customers. The idea is that we don't want gentrification of the public transport network or any other service for that matter that we provide, which means if people can't afford a Go card, for example, to prepay for their transport and they want a paper ticket, we still have to provide an opportunity for them to buy a paper ticket. So I don't know whether there was a lacking, probably the depth of understanding really grew for me. So that particular research project, we spoke to, as I mentioned, a lot of vulnerable customers in regional areas as well. That's really important, not to remain too centric on your metropolitan areas, but make sure you've got your regional lens on as well. The other thing is that we've got, like, our vision for the department is to provide an integrated transport system accessible to everyone. We've got an accessibility and inclusion strategy, which we've just done, again, another research project which baselines our customers, our staff and our partners' perspective of how we're tracking around accessibility and inclusion. And we'll now be able to do an annual research task to compare how we're tracking. So I think and the results of that are quite positive. So I think we're tracking okay, but now we know what we know. I think before it was kind of gut feel. Cara, I can't hear
Cara,
you.
you're on mute.
Temple, I swore I wasn't going to do that. A question came through from Larissa on the strategic use of using the word customer instead of citizen. Was that a purposeful choice, and does it influence the way one thinks about them?
Yes, it is purposeful, but we use them interchangeably. So I like to, and it's a constant ongoing conversation about who the customer is. Is a stakeholder a customer? Well, the answer is yes. Is the community groups and government agencies customers? Yes, that's the answer. Everyone's a customer. But depending on what you're doing in your day and your transaction with the department or engagement with the department, you might be in your mode as private citizen, or you might be a member of a lobby group who's talking with the agency about a specific project, for example, or you might be talking with your P&C group about your local school bus stop, that sort of thing. So you can range between a number of personas depending on what you're doing in your day, which is why I've steered away from using citizen specifically, because that kind of infers, for me at least, that it's the general use of the transport system, where it's a lot more complex than that. And so as long as people are talking about customers, I don't mind if they say citizens, as long as they understand that their role is to provide an enhanced service to the internal and external customers that they serve. So good question. It's an ongoing conversation.
Excellent. So on the topic of personas, Jonathan, you talked about your guys' mission is helping companies that want to use robotics to get the robots and implement that. But you mentioned there's a challenge in the small to medium-sized businesses and the uptake of robotics. So I'm just wondering, is there an ideal kind of persona or corporate profile, or even, what's the readiness of a business that you look for when it's the ideal time for them to engage robots?
Yeah, it's a good question. And because there are so many of these companies, they do tend to be quite different. And all the companies we've seen are very, very diverse in their appetite for robotics. Most companies surveyed think they need robots, but they don't know why and where, but they just assume that that's what's going to be required, and they're probably right. But it's a matter of figuring out where they're going to be used. And we've also noticed over the last probably decade, some companies have failed to adopt robots. They've tried and they've failed because just in the way they try and implement them, they stop what they're doing in the way they're doing it now, and they get somebody in to install some robots. because that company might promise that it will all be great and it will work, and of course it doesn't. Well, it doesn't work in time for them. So at some point they have to go back to the old way of doing things in order to generate income. So they sort of can't go long enough before it actually works. So some of it's about how you implement things. Do you do things in parallel? Do you just tackle little parts first? It's not really much about the technology anymore. It's more about how you implement it, how you retrain your staff, how you adapt things that you can already buy. Which is why we're not heavy on our engineers in our lab. We're far more heavily leaning towards the design people and the people that understand other people and reskilling and stuff. So the appetite's there, but there's people need direction, and we need to understand their businesses too. So that's another important thing. So we're in a huge learning phase at the moment.
And is there, I love that they want a robot, but they don't know why. It reminds me, when I was managing digital for RSEQ, and like, I was in a meeting and one of the executives just said, "So what are we doing with drones?" And I was like, why are we doing something with drones? I think it was, a heavy topic that month. But is there a minimum budget? Like at a price point where you can't even have a discussion?
Well, actually, that's another thing we're trying to do at the moment. Is we've got some kit, right? So the concept here is, with these smaller companies, we work with them, we trial things with the stuff we've already got, to minimize the cost of exploring and seeing if these things will actually work. To de-risk it effectively, so that they don't have to take a risky bet on something that, one of these smaller collaborative robots that I showed in my videos is of the order of $40,000 or $50,000, that kind of scale. So for a small business of 5 people, that's a lot of money. So de-risking it, but it actually makes sense if it's guaranteed to work at whatever their business is, that they probably could convince investors, whoever invests in their company, to pay that. So it's about de-risking stuff with existing robots that others have or we have, or that sort of thing.
Yeah, because I feel like so much innovation comes from those mid-sized companies and not the big end of town.
That's right.
So
exactly.
The accessibility of them to have access is great.
Yeah, totally.
So Ray, I may just switch back to you. And I think the discussion of equity and fairness is obviously very timely. I think it was last year or the year before, I was at South by Southwest in Austin, and every single panel, every single discussion was about diversity of design. So, how could you have a design team in Mountain View creating a Google map for a city in India if nobody has ever ridden public transportation there, understands the challenges? And then obviously with kind of like political landscape and everything that's going on, a lot of companies are looking more towards diversity of thought and equity of thought. Have you seen examples of organizations that have innovated new service design that is fair and equitable? Like, I know you mentioned there's a need to kind of break and rebuild the frameworks and research them, but have you actually seen any examples of companies who have successfully broken the mold and rebuilt it?
Well, that was a hard question. Corporations in any part of the world tend to be reflective of their societies. And so while I think many are sort of ahead of some of the trends in their countries, they're still somewhat trapped in the local conditions. But I have seen lots of progress. And in fact, on average, I would be willing to argue, at least in my experience in the United States, the government of the United States is lagging severely behind the private corporations and nonprofits in the United States in their ability to be inclusive in their hiring, in their staff and in their thinking. One of the truisms about humans is if you have different humans, you will automatically get different thinking. But if you have the same kinds of humans, you won't necessarily get different kinds of thinking without great work. But one of the easiest examples is I can imagine what it's like to be another man. It's much harder for me to properly imagine what it's like to be a woman. And I can give many other examples. I'm left-handed. I have no idea what it's like to be right-handed. So if I'm trying to design for a right-handed person, I don't know how to do it. Now, of course, I live in a world in which it is designed for right-handed people, and they don't know how to design it for left-handed people, which makes the world dangerous to me. So I think it's a work in progress for any organization to be inclusive in their hiring first, because if you don't have different people, you can't get there. But once you have different people, you have to listen to them. And to me, that's part of what I meant by with. With, it requires linking. Talking to people is much different than talking with people. The moment we say with, we're on the right wavelength for properly making progress.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by like the linguistic changes that are involved in your strategy. I mean, did you collaborate with linguistics departments and?
Not yet. That is among the many reasons why I'm eager for us in the service research community to expand our reach. I would love to find a linguist who's interested in such a topic, because language does allow us to think. Without language, we would be throwing rocks at each other. So language allows us to think about robots and customers and all these other things that are essential. But language is also a tool for oppression. And that's been a huge part of human history, that it's been a tool for oppression. And that's what I meant by the Emancipate Mental Slavery line. It's also, when Rebecca played John Lennon's Imagine song, that's also on that same wavelength as Bob Marley, thinking differently. But a linguist could really help. And I would love to find multiple linguists from different parts of the world. Different languages think differently. And that's part of the reason we have languages, is part of the reason different languages are important. But we surely could find some common ground in how to think about each other in a way that's respectful.
Well, I wrote about 20 questions that I had to ask you guys, but we have run out of time. So I will say thank you, everyone, for your time and your insights. I have learned a lot. And I'm sure that everyone else has. Thanks to everyone on the line who's participated. And now Rebecca will talk to you about the next upcoming webinar.
Great. Well, let me also add my thanks to all the speakers, and also to you, Cara, for a really interesting set of thought-provoking ideas. One of the things that we were trying to achieve with SERVSIG 2020 is to have our speakers coming to us from outside of services. It was quite purposeful to select both Jonathan and Julie, who are outside of services marketing academics, to bring different perspectives. And we're going to continue that theme at the next webinar. So we have the next keynote address, which will be on the future of services, but this time from a technology perspective. So we've got Professor Dietmar, or Distinguished Professor Dietmar Hupmacher, who is a QUT biomedical engineer who specialises in 3D printing of body parts. And so he's going to talk about, what the future might look like there. We've got Monica Bradley from Purposeful Capital, who deals in venture capital and sits on a number of boards. And she's going to talk about it from the perspective of AI and where the future might be heading with data. We've got Danny Deng, who runs a restaurant chain in the Netherlands, where they use robots in the front line to serve in restaurants. So he's going to be talking about his experiences there. And we will have it facilitated by Professor Gabby Oderkirken, who is the former head of the Service Science Factory at Maastricht University, and is certainly well across robotics in aged care. So I guess picking up a little on that theme of robotics, but extending it more broadly to all kinds of different technology to say what might our future look like there. And the webinar after that, our final one, is called The Moral Limits of Service Markets, Just Because We Can, Should We? And it will be delving into the ethics propositions of how we deliver and design services from a whole range of different industry areas. So this time Brisbane drew the short straw, so we've got the 6 a.m. start. It's actually the Americans who are doing, and the Canadians who are doing well in the draw next time. So please do join us for the next SERVSIG webinar, which will be on the 20th of October in Brisbane and the 19th of October in Europe and the US. So again, thank you very much. And we will continue our cross-discipline practitioner academic sort of discussion at the next webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us.